Welcome to Trends in AI.
And it's a new year. New us?
Well, same frenzy continuing. Welcome everybody who's joined us here live in Lab 42. Good afternoon for those of you who are following us
in Europe.
online in Europe, and
Good
good morning for those in the US. My name is Jakub Savrel, founder of Zeta Alpha. And as always, co-hosting with Dinos.
Hi everyone, I'm Dinos. I'm an AI researcher at Zeta Alpha and your host for Trends in AI. So yeah, we made it, January 2025.
Yeah, civilization did not end yet. Well, it might soon. And let's dive right in. So this is the New Year's edition. So we're going to do a little bit special flavor today.
Yeah, the content is going to be a bit different, but as always, we focus on things that happened pretty recently and also looking a bit in the
looking back a little bit, looking forward a little bit. We're basically going to predict where we are in AI at the end of the year.
With perfect accuracy.
Yeah. So last year, our predictions were 5 out of 10, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to do perfect this year. And we want to wish you a little bit late. Happy New Year. So a new year always starts with New Year's resolutions, right? What is yours, Dinos?
Well, so of course my resolution is about AI, but not directly. So I want to use AI more, and the way I want to use it is to find new stuff to read. So I want to read a few more books, but I want a little help from an AI to tell me which books are good or bad. So I have an app that uses AI as part of it to recommend books.
Yeah, but real books on paper.
Real books, yes.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
Less screen time. I think
that's
a very common one. Well, I try to do it by trying to stay away from Twitter for various reasons. Let's put it that way. But there's an alternative, right? And I would say definitely a trend in AI for this year has been a mass exodus to blue sky. And also with Zeta Alpha, we have migrated our collection of signals about papers to blue sky. It's actually already pretty substantial. So you can get, it's not the same volume as Twitter, but you pick up the same kind of trends in general.
Yeah, and thanks to way less restrictive rate limits, we can also get much more diversity in the people that we include for the signal. So if you guys have papers that you publish, make sure to talk about them on Blue Sky, and you will get boosted on our platform as well.
Absolutely. Of course, there's one of the reasons for us to want to stay away from Twitter is the absolute toxic behavior of Elon Musk, especially in politics. And this might soon be broadened. Well, it's certainly been a way to chase people away from Twitter. So I think in terms of your New Year's resolution of reading more books on paper, soon there might be a reason to also stay away from TikTok. Who knows?
I'm not using TikTok, thankfully. So
good. Google also has a New Year's resolution: catch up to ChatGPT. Sundar Pichai started the year by stating that he wants to have, his prediction, I guess, is that he will have 500 million people using Gemini by the end of the year.
That might sound a lot of people, but at the same time, for Google, not sure if that's too high of a benchmark to reach.
I don't know where they're starting, but just yesterday I got this email that they're kind of making it a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually. Gemini is turned on for all Google Workspace subscriptions, raising the price from $12 to $14 per month. So basically they're slashing the price. First it was $20 per user per month. Now it's only $2, but it's obligatory if you're using Gmail in a business.
And they're also adding it to Chrome, right? You can access Gemini not by going to any website, but straight from the Chrome bar.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be free there.
Maybe also, a small model.
I think also relevant is that Microsoft launched a kind of free
Copilot.
chat Copilot version. So I think if you look at kind of the billions of people that Google serves, this New Year's resolution will be pretty easy to fulfill. I'm sure he'll get a handsome bonus for making it happen. But I think the quality is actually there. So in December, we mentioned that Google was almost back on top. And at least in the LMSys Arena benchmark, they are actually on top. Is it still a relevant benchmark?
Right. So I feel like people have started to see through it more, in that it's not the absolute signal of what's the best LLM, because also the use cases have started to develop much more than just just give me a question, I'll answer. So now people use coding, LLMs for coding, they use them for other purposes. But I think overall, it is a pretty accurate signal of what are the competitors right now.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Gemini is definitely a strong choice.
Yeah, definitely strong model, and good news for Google that they're in the number one spot. What I find most interesting is that actually some of the models which do very well on these kind of coding, mathematics, and science benchmarks, like O1, are actually not the top models here.
Yeah, because you also have the latency factor.
Yeah, could be the bias of the particular benchmark. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about these kind of models. There's been a huge tsunami of models published in December. This is a very nice overview published by Hugging Face. And this is the sort of notable model releases by month for 2024. So December has really been like very overwhelming. Let's go there for a bit. Share this instead.
Yep.
Right. So let's scroll to December. What do we see here? Nova by Amazon. Sora in the Christmas period, launched by OpenAI,
as an
right?
official feature, and the Pro and Premium tiers.
Yeah, but then there was VO2 by Google, really like killing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, at least in some same prompt comparisons, they seem to have picked some good examples. Though I think it's still a waitlist, right? In the more Google traditional spirit, it's not a product as Sora.
Yeah, but the examples that you see online are really very stunning. We see, of course, the Gemini we already talked about. There's also a Gemini thinking mode, is like O1 type of model. And what else is notable here? Llama 3.3, Polygemma 2, DeepSeek. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, I think they had both in the research and the model front, they open sourced a lot of the weights of the models, but also the research reports of the findings, what they did, what went wrong. And so I think it's a good contribution overall.
And of course, the announcement of O3, we're also going to talk about that. And Modern Bird, kind of a bit vintage, but a new twist on the Bird model, and lots more. Too much to cover today. So let me switch back here. It's a very nice overview, this Hugging Face AI timeline. Hope they continue doing that. On GitHub?
Yeah, so we see a lot of trends kind of as we finish the year and start the new one. A lot of hype is around agents. So Hugging Face also gave their spin, which is a library that is less heavy or orchestrated as some other frameworks that kind of carried on agents. So they made a separate one that is very bare bones. We have Modern Bird that you mentioned. So Modern Bird, in a very brief summary, is a retraining of the bird architecture with more data and more modern optimization tweaks. So it runs faster with things like flash attention. And it's a really good base model for classical NLP, but also we've seen more retrieval models based on it. And I guess two of the other things we want to highlight here is how people generally want to move into this RAG space, where they have libraries for treating their difficult types of documents like Office. So Microsoft themselves opened up a library called Markdown, which converts their office types to Markdown. And Nvidia, surprisingly, is also trying to put their hands in the pie with NV Ingest, which is kind of a mega library to ingest documents.
Yeah, kind of a RAG prototyping library. Very interesting. Check it out on GitHub. In the category of AI startups and funding, the large numbers continue. For example, Liquid raised 250 million for a kind of transformer-less LLM architecture. Lots of startups in AI for health. In Synthesia, the avatar generating startup, raised a very large sum of money, $180 million. And we're going to talk about robotics a little bit later, but it's not all US. Also, Zurich-based Anybotics was very successful in fundraising. Two notable new startups are Mira Murati, the former CTO of OpenAI, is recruiting people for some kind of enterprise AI startup, stealth still. And then we're going to talk about the ARC prize, but actually Francois Chollet is, I think, leaving Google and founding a new private lab. But the absolute blockbuster in terms of funding was Databricks. They raised $10 billion in kind of a
Series J, I think.
Series Zeta or something like that. And I think it means that they're going to actually be buying a lot of other companies, more likely to use that for consolidation. But we diverge a little bit this time from our format, because what we really want to highlight in this edition of Trends in AI is our 10 predictions for AI in 2025.
I mean, how else can we start without addressing the elephant in the room?
I guess the main question is AGI or not. But there's many opinions, right? So I think Sam Altman writes on his personal blog, I think his wish list under the Christmas tree.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a spin on flexing a bit on how OpenAI has mastered all of the techniques required to get to AGI, and he's confident that they will get there. And so that's not even a point he's trying to consider. He's looking forward to superintelligence and how they're preparing for it.
Well, they did announce this O3 model, but I find this sentence pretty cocky here, that he says, "We are now confident we know how to build AGI."
Well, do it.
Well, maybe first showing it and then saying it. But also Dario Amodei from Anthropic is pretty optimistic on the prospects. Also fundraising, but don't close it, please. He doesn't see 25 yet as a realistic possibility, but 26 for him is pretty realistic.
Yeah, that must mean that they're cooking up some great weights of models currently.
Yeah, they haven't released anything in a while, right? Yeah. Sonnet 3.5 was the last big model release. So I think it was just before Christmas, right? The ARC AGI deadline.
We discussed it at the webinar.
And then we saw this graph here. It's basically the timeline of ARC AGI benchmark results. Here we have January 24, where GPT-4 was actually scoring under 10%. Mm-hmm. And within just 12 months, we are now at 85%.
Yeah, right? So a very accurate caption on this. Is AGI hitting a wall or building a wall?
Well, certainly something has happened. So maybe you can explain ARC, the ARC challenge.
Right. So I think this challenge is a pretty good analogy on how we test humans for intelligence with IQ.
Yeah.
So they try to come up with a similar system on tasks that are pretty trivial to solve if you think them through, but they're not like what you typically see on benchmarks.
Yeah, and these tasks are kind of analogical reasoning on visual puzzles, right?
Right. So there will be like a color sequence or some squares being colored on and off, and you have to predict the next state. So it's a collection of these tasks, and they actually turned out to be very hard. So they had it running for a full year or half a year, and people really made slow progress,
Yeah.
which kind of became greater and greater as the year finished.
So this picture here went viral a little bit, and my
Mhm.
daughter asked me during the Christmas holiday, "Dad, now that we have AGI achieved, should I really continue my studies?"
And what was your answer?
I said, "Well, it's called ARC AGI, but it's nothing actually to do with AGI because it's a set of puzzles which are easy for humans but hard for machines." Um,
Yeah, so we also have the benchmarks from just for OpenAI models with a few other baselines being humans and other ensembles of systems.
yeah, because this wall is really O3, right? Which is not like a public model yet. So what is O3 and why are they getting such high scores?
Well, I think for the ones detail oriented, they'll notice that they skipped O2. So it's the continuation of the O paradigm of OpenAI models, which are reasoning with more inference time compute allocated to them. And they also show here. So they first released O1 mini and O1 preview, which were kind of their in progress models. And so on the full public O1 release, they allowed a parameter to tune how much compute you give. And we see that they all perform better than the original preview models, but they're still on the similar level of the 30%. And suddenly, just by releasing these new models, which have also been tuned a bit on this benchmark, so it's not entirely zero shot or in the prompt. On the low compute mode, it gets almost double the performance, 76%. On the
Well,
high,
low compute mode, I find it pretty astonishing that they don't have like the benchmark where O1 has the same compute
Right.
as O3, right? That would be a very interesting data point.
Yeah, I guess this also means though that it's a bigger model. So on a traditional OpenAI logic, you have to scale it.
Yeah.
So just spending fewer cycles on a bigger model is probably how they got this larger bill.
Yeah, the x-axis is dollars, by the way. So I think this is something like $20 of compute to answer one question, right?
Per task, yeah.
Per task, yeah. So nothing close to being realistically available. But I think they did announce that O3 would be available January or February.
Oh,
right?
really?
Yeah.
I missed that.
Well, they'll miss the deadline as well. So who knows? Anyway, if you want to know whether AGI is coming, it's also noteworthy or worth your time to listen to the keynote from Ilya Sutskever, who received the Test of Time Award at NeurIPS in December. And he says superintelligence is coming. Not surprisingly, because his company is called
Safe Superintelligence.
Safe Superintelligence. He didn't say when it was coming, but he kind of summarized it as being agentic, being based on reasoning, so inference time compute, understanding in like some kind of sense, and being self-aware. And there's a very interesting twist in this. In his lecture, where he explains how self-awareness is actually extremely useful for systems to be accurate, right? If you have kind of a contextualized self-awareness, you can actually answer some questions more correctly than if you're not. Much more practical operationalization of AGI is something that leaked out of the Microsoft OpenAI financial agreements, where they just said, well, we don't really have a definition, or we're not able to agree on what that would be, but since it plays a role in our contractual terms, we'll just define it as any system that can generate at least 100 billion in profit.
Which is pretty significant.
Yeah.
But at the same time, is it?
So for one, it makes predicting AGI in 25 pretty simple, because I think it's dead sure that OpenAI will not reach 100 billion in profit. maybe 100 billion in loss if they're extrapolating from their current burn rate, but certainly not profit. But on the other hand, if you think about it, Apple, Google, and Microsoft are making 100 billion in profit per year. So it's also just like a question of when OpenAI will join the club. So let's move on to our predictions, to our real. So we will skip the prediction of whether AGI will be achieved, but we have some more detailed aspects. And what's the first one?
Yeah, so I think aligning with all the public research that's being happened on trying to replicate O1, but also match it and outperform it, I think we'll generally see a trend where people spend more and more time investigating how to accurately make these models efficiently use these more tokens at inference time.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of the main driving factors where we'll see all the improvements. On the left, we have a figure that OpenAI first released with O1, which just shows that if you have more compute at test time, then you have a better accuracy on their aim task, which is, I think, coding. And I think this also aligns a bit with where people are supposed to be using these models, because they're not better at every task. So you'll see in this chart that just for a general type writing is not that much better than 4.0, also because probably it's been trained on a more less diverse domain. But where it really shines is this mathematical reasoning or code generation and so on.
What I find really interesting is while they were training this model, they made a really big lobbying effort to make sure that all the AI regulation was based on the amount of compute used for training, which is a paradigm they had already abandoned at that time. So inference time compute scaling will dominate AI progress is our prediction. It's a fairly easy prediction. We'd be surprised if this doesn't continue to be the trend.
Right, and this is because we see a lot of movement also from smaller labs where that they try to either distill O1, such as this one from Berkeley, which SkyT1 fine-tuned on supervised data, similar to the alpaca moment that we had with Llama, which just train on outputs and try to replicate the behavior with no reinforcement learning. And they say that they somewhat match the performance, although I doubt if it generalizes as well as O1.
So it's distilled as well from synthetic data generated by O1.
Right. So they just say for $400 worth of OpenAI data, they can create this kind of Llama, I think a Llama fine-tune that does something similar.
Llama is the base model here. Okay. So that's...
Qwen. Actually, it's Qwen.
Oh, it's Qwen. Yeah. So it's actually not a very big moat that OpenAI is defended by. And what do you have here?
Well, inference time scaling doesn't mean just the model will get better at reasoning. I think we'll see a lot of this paradigm where we try to fit more information in the context so it can reason about it. We don't see it fully yet because O1 kind of struggles with more information other than the goal and the problem itself. But OpenAI as well wants to move to a future where you just have all your past conversations and it can use it as more context and try to solve the task better for you.
Yeah. Well, since inference time compute scaling is essentially reasoning, having a memory can help, right? There's also, you mentioned the T1 model, but there's a lot more people working on replicating O1.
Yeah, and so we have 3 papers just to shout out here. One we also actually had in the last edition, which is Marco O1. And also in December, and I think start of January, we also had these 2 kind of survey papers that try to map out the field of reasoning or reinforcement learning or meta chain of thoughts. And they kind of show that, that we have a lot of published work in the past where people try to fit the puzzles together and see which of those does it take to actually reach an O1-like model.
Yeah, which of these 3 do you like the best?
I would say probably the third paper is quite
the
less
two-word system to reasoning.
Less of a survey paper and more of a kind of proposing what we need to get there.
Yeah.
While for the paper called Scaling of Search and Learning is more of we literally just go all the domains.
Literature review kind of.
All domains. Yeah.
So I think we'll see a lot more of this, and I think we'll see it dominating the progress in large language models, at least. And it has a kind of direct consequence into our second prediction. We did predict last year that AMD was going to make some first inroads into breaking Nvidia's dominance in the training side of things. Hasn't really happened. A few supercomputer deliveries here and there, but this switch to inference time reasoning is really a new opportunity to break that dominance, because even if you're training sort of ecosystem with CUDA and everything doesn't transfer that well to other hardware, actually running these models is very attractive if you need lots of inference.
Right, and as also we move to edge devices and people wanting to run stuff on their own, they're obviously going to go for the cheaper and most efficient option, without having this kind of vendor lock-in that big cloud providers have.
And there's an opportunity for AMD, but obviously also for Google, with their new Trillium TPUs.
Right, and I think looking at the pricing, they kind of compare against their latest generation, which is 3 or 4 times more efficient at only twice the cost.
Yeah, well, if you need lots of inference time reasoning, basically the cost will be the dominating factor, and I don't think people are going to tolerate these kind of 60 to 70% profit margins that Nvidia is charging. Actually, the AMD hardware stacks up pretty well against Nvidia, right? You have say a better flops performance, better memory capacity, larger memory, and a lower price. And
what does this mean for us? Because obviously, most people don't care about how many flops their compute has, but more what can you do with the models that you can run on them, and
what's your price per million tokens,
exactly.
Essentially.
Right. So and we generally see a very sharp. This is a logarithmic scale, and we see that the compute and the performance both go down and up correspondingly. So before we had GPT-3 that cost about $60 to have a pretty measly performance of 42 on MMLU, and now we have 40 points higher with GPT-4 at $45, and that's not even the state of the art anymore.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of upside for people using these models. Pricing goes down and speed is also up.
Very rapidly, yeah. And that's driven not only by the large hardware vendors like Nvidia and Google and AMD. Here in this graph, you see from our own data collection the popularity of hardware in as a delta from 2023 to 2024. So the blue lines are the increase in popularity, and the red bars are the absolute numbers of mentions. So you see that, of course, the A100 is dominating in terms of absolute numbers, but its growth is very low. Whereas the H100 is growing very rapidly, but its numbers are still fairly low in research papers, at least. Interestingly, the TPU is really growing at an almost similar pace as the A100. And you see new challengers like Cerebras, but especially Grok, kind of coming out of nowhere with super high growth numbers. So that's our prediction. Compute market for inference will break Nvidia's dominance. We don't know who to bet on, but certainly the sort of huge market share of 90% of Nvidia will probably go down to something like 75. My bet. All right. So the third prediction is also just following the trend. We see a lot of AI adoption in enterprise, and pretty much the trends there are.
Well, it's agents and RAG, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is quite important also because enterprises have less tolerance for hallucinations and failure. So everyone should and is probably already benchmarking against some more faithfulness and accuracy metrics that are not just how good does the output look, but is it actually citing highly trustworthy sources, and is it grounded on documents that I have in my collection? And I guess kind of on a more buzzword topic, agents are also helping you create better answers because you move away from the more strict definition of how you output the document and make it more dynamic on finding new information when needed. So yeah, this was a nice benchmark that I saw on Twitter. Even on simple cases like question answering, agentic behavior helps, and even more so on difficult tasks like math or the GEA benchmark. And we also had a pretty interesting statement from Satya Nadella that said agents will transform software as we know it.
Well, he thinks that actually agents will eat software as we know it. His statement is pretty radical, but he says basically most enterprise applications are just manipulations or some table of information in a database, and this whole sort of front end will be replaced by essentially agents and chat. Because these kind of classical building of screens with lots of buttons, I think he sees that as a thing of the past. Well, I think that's I would not make that my prediction, but and we see also that sort of the foundation model vendors are suddenly all moving into enterprise search, right? Because they also realize that unless you can do RAG, properly on enterprise proprietary data, there's very little value for companies to really be using this every day. So you have a paper here that kind of builds onto this topic.
Yeah, so it's kind of combining all of the three previous predictions. So one of the common shortcoming of reasoning models is that they don't integrate knowledge, external knowledge very well.
Yeah.
And they also usually have a trade-off in their training data. It's not that diverse as the normal 4.0 counterpart, for example. So this paper from Renmin University called Search 01 tries to combine the two. So their architecture is kind of agentic and RAG heavy in the sense that they enforce the model to only reason when it knows something and when it doesn't, instead of saying perhaps. So they do this nice analysis on O1 that in its internal reasoning or O1-like models, they say maybe it's like this. So based on that assumption, I'll continue. Instead, it does a function call so it can retrieve information and then integrate that information more efficiently. And also, I think they have a benchmark where they show how you present this information to the model is critical. So another comparison is not only having a RAG infused model, like they take Quen with questions, which is the open source reasoning model they can use. And instead of just plugging RAG in, they have this, what they call reasoning in documents module that takes the external information and tries to summarize it, break it down, and integrate it into the thinking process.
Yeah.
And they show pretty good results. So, I mean, they outperform both the baseline that does no reasoning and there's no retrieval augmented generation and the one that does plain stuffing in the context by a significant margin on general question answering and math. And they even find, I think this is interesting, that it can, just by using this reasoning in the document module, it can integrate more information. So moving more than 1 or 3 relevant documents. Yeah, and I think another interesting benchmark they did was on GPQA even. In the next slide, they show that they get better performance than experts. So when the base model didn't, it got around 60 score on GPQA biology, while the biologists, the experts, got 68. Then the augmented system that they built gets around 69.5%. And they also saw on the plot above that this helps even in cases where you don't really need reasoning, but more question answering or multi-hop. This also works. So I think it's a really good work, and it's open source, so people can try it out. And I definitely think that people would go towards that.
And not following this paper, but actually preceding it, we thought this was an excellent idea to actually make a kind of research assistant in the Zeta Alpha product. So if you're doing systematic literature review, want to really deep dive on some topic, you want to do legal or patent search or a full overview of all the questions and challenges in your project, we've built this inference time scaled reasoning agent with retrieval in the loop that we've launched late last year. And it's called the Zeta Alpha research agent. So I'm going to put a little bit. Oh, let's see. So basically, it's looking at different aspects of the question, reading all the documents, reformulating the plan, and ends up with a full research report. And it can do it with external data as well. Um, so, um, yeah. Um, so, for example, in the light of current politics, if you're interested in David Sachs, the new US AI czar's opinion on AI regulation, there's probably not a single newspaper article which gives you that information. And if you sort of do the classical RAG approach, you will get a very short answer which says something like, well, he's expected to be lenient on AI regulation. But if you do this kind of more systematic review from all the sources that ever mentioned anything about his opinions on this topic, you will break this down into a search plan, answer all these questions, and then get like the full rap sheet of everything he's ever done on the topic. More on that later. 1 month after us, Google actually launched the same feature. They call it deep research, and it's the same idea. Break it down into steps, do search, and generate a report. So we're seeing these kind of agentic RAG systems really, delivering the real value in complex questions in companies for enterprise AI. But what you're seeing now is that they're still very much sort of an orchestration of different prompted systems, right? You have a planner, an evaluator, a searcher, a summarizer, some agent which orchestrates everything and ties it back. And those are still very much prompted. So what we see evolving in 25 is really the full end-to-end optimization of these kind of systems through AI optimizers. So, for example, there's this approach by Microsoft recently published called SAMO, which optimizes using some kind of genetic type algorithm. There's the recent TextGrad paper, which does kind of backprop on textual prompts. There's the work in DSPy, optimizing DSPy programs. And if you do a search, there's actually a lot more. There's semantic backpropagation, which is actually a Jürgen Schmidhuber paper, mind you. So, and tape agents by ServiceNow. So there's a whole new cluster of sort of agentic system prompt optimization evolving. All right, let's move on. Another very interesting take at these agentic systems is actually this paper published in the last day.
Research.
Google Research. They themselves claim it's a successor to the transformer architecture called Titans. And it basically internally separates in the model this whole architecture of sort of short-term and long-term memory and figuring out in a sort of agentic way what to remember and when to recall it. So just came out, hard to say whether it will have impact, but advertised as the successor to transformers. and very good benchmarks on language modeling. Let's move to the next prediction.
Right. So
if companies are going to use agentic RAG systems, then
it's probably going to be a substitute for humans as well at some point.
Could be.
At least some very highly influential people think so. So we have Salesforce saying that they don't need any more software engineers. We have them enough, and agents, AI agents, will fill the spots where something is missing. And so does Mark Zuckerberg, that says mid-level tier, at least for their software engineers, they're going to be fully replaced by AI. I don't know what that means. Everyone is getting promoted, demoted, or fired. But surely there's a lot of mid-level engineers right now, which I think he also joined that with a new round of layoffs, didn't he?
Well, he's very masculine these days, so I don't know where that's coming from.
And yeah, on the exact topic of AI agents for work, I think Devon just released their general availability plan of $500 for your engineer per month.
So this is just from Silicon Valley. If we look at the Swiss Alps, the World Economic Forum has published a very recent report on the future of jobs. Well, they see this trend coming very quickly. So in the first figure, it's actually kind of the skills demand. So the number of people who are taking generative AI courses on Coursera. So they see that more than doubling in the last half year. They surveyed about 1,000 executives from all the large companies, and 86% of them are seeing AI as impacting the base of their business. And if you look into the details of this report, there's a lot of very specific information about which jobs are going to be in demand and which jobs are going to disappear. And I think most interesting prediction is this one from figure 2.7, where they predict that basically the amount of, so the light blue is the work which is done fully automated. The dark blue is the work which is done by people without assistance of AI, and the middle blue is kind of assisted human work. And you see that the percentage of work done by AI is going up by 50%. So that has to have some labor market impact. So in that sense, our prediction is a fairly safe one, I think.
Right, and we also have a paper that we spotted called Agent Laboratory. It kind of tags along to this line of work where people try to automate the job of the AI researcher or researcher more general. Although I like this paper because it gives it more of a collaborative twist. And so the idea is that you give it some of your existing ideas instead of it coming up with new tasks that maybe are not applicable, and some of your existing notes or requirements, and then a whole zoo of agents similar to this simulacra paper that will have different personas, like the postdoc, the PhD, the professor, the engineer. They'll all work together with you to produce a literature review, to do an experiment, to run code, to write code, and to also write the final report. What I like about this paper is they compare a lot. This is the architecture where internally a lot of agents will work on different parts of the job. And they play some personas, as I said, and they rely on these two components, which is the MLE solver and the paper solver, to kind of delegate this task to a more agentic behavior that iterates based on the output, the errors, and so on. And what I like from this work is that they compare against simple, fully autonomous mode versus using with humans in the loop. And the message is generally clear that having a human in there helps in almost all cases, except surprisingly for significance. Apparently, AI can find out reports and make papers that have bigger significance compared to just human ideas.
Statistical significance or significance for the reader?
For the field, more
Right.
like. And generally, they also try to kind of minimize the cost, because this can really, if you let O1 go off and do its own research, it can come very expensive, but they try to kind of keep it in the middle.
So they actually submitted these papers to NeurIPS?
No, because one of the findings is that they're still short of, I think, about 2 points to the threshold criteria.
So they all got rejected.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are actual reviewer scores in that sense.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So our fifth prediction is in a little bit of a different alley. So we've seen late last year kind of the whole search field being uprooted by vision-based search methods, right?
Well, also I
With
think
Kolpali
in
and-
general, we also have a lot of vision language models or multimodal models, and the natural trend is how can we use them for search. So I think two big proponents of this paradigm has been the DSE model from University of Waterloo, which stands for document screenshot embedding. And then we also, of course, have Kolpali, which kind of combines PaLi-Gemma with Colbert, or Pali-Any model that is VLM. And we very recently also had Jerry Liu from Llama Index coming up with their own twist on the DSE model.
Yeah, this
architecture.
VDR model.
So yeah, generally, we see a lot of people trying to simplify their pre-processing pipelines with a model that can just take your data as they are in a visual format and try to create embeddings out of that.
Yeah. And so our prediction is basically that will be the mainstream way of searching textual and visual documents,
right,
by the end of the year.
So I guess it also kind of boils down to what task you have for these models. So this Kolpali paper proposed the VDORA benchmark, which is a lot of tasks that are visually rich documents like reports or tables, figures, and so on. And we already kind of see this benchmark saturating. So the original Kolpali model had an average score of 80 in DCG. And I think 3-4 months later, we're already at 90%, even with models that don't use Colbert late interaction. So on that note, we have a paper that was a Christmas present from Alibaba called the GME. And their goal here is to kind of create one architecture that can handle a lot of modalities, but not just on a single text-to-text or image-to-image or image-to-text and so on, but they also focus a lot on this unimodality that you can throw anything in the model, even text with image, and still get a similar search result. So I guess a lot of this paper's contribution comes to how do you create the training data set for such a model. They base on a 7B model, like most of the state-of-the-art retrievers these days, and they also rely a lot on synthetic data. So on some of the domains where you don't have a lot of this rich interaction between text and images or joint modality, they generate synthetic data from existing data sets. And they also come up with a benchmark to kind of evaluate this. Right, so they first show that combining all of the different modalities against previous arguments where you can train in one and you get benefits in all if you use a good backbone. Here they show that all modalities benefit from training on all of them.
I really like this picture where they show that basically CLIP didn't work at all because the modalities were fully separated in the embedding space, right?
At least it means that the modality of the input was a significant influence to where the embedding
like the main input
out.
actually. Yeah.
And in this model, just by training on this commonly throughout the training, their embeddings are all bunched up together, regardless of input modality, but more on the topic of the image. And on the benchmark that they proposed, which is a superset of VDORA, they get state-of-the-art while still maintaining, importantly, performance on BEER or text-only tasks.
So we're saying this is going to be the new normal in at the end of the year. And at Zeta Alpha, we're certainly working very hard to help the world get there. Kind of moving beyond just vision language models, we also think that in terms of R&D, maybe not so much yet in terms of applications, 2025 will be the year of world models. So what are world models? Basically models that combine not only vision and language, but also sort of physics modeling of the world. And in many cases also embodiment, right? Applicability to actually run the model with sensors and motors on a robot.
And I guess who is the best positioned company that has a lot of compute to work on this very data-intensive front?
Nvidia.
It's Nvidia.
And they just launched this Cosmos model and a paper that comes with it. So let's dive into the paper.
Yeah, well, not dive in too much because it's a really big paper, and they describe a lot of architectural decisions and variants of this model. But on a very high level, what this model is kind of a base foundation model that understands the world and has been pre-trained on a lot of data from different sources like physics interactions, video of driving cars, and so on. And the main selling point of this model is that we pre-trained it on a lot of data, and just by fine-tuning on few samples of your domain and kind of extrapolating from your few samples to generate more data, we can adapt it to kind of all these useful use cases that you need some either virtual control or even embodied control.
And is it open source?
It is open source, both the weights and the whole architecture, the pipeline that they use for fine-tuning. So
Yeah.
it's kind of give us your data and we'll build a model for you, and you can use it however you want.
Yeah, but it's not a very big model, right?
Right.
It's how many parameters?
I don't remember the parameter count, but it's a very well optimized as well, since
Yeah.
it's very critical that it runs
on
device.
On device. Yeah. So in terms of world models, we're also seeing kind of, well, this first of all, create a new category of startups like Fei Li's World Labs, which is really has as its business goal to provide these foundational world models. But we're also seeing kind of a convergence of many different strands of work where the video generation models are actually also becoming kind of world models, right?
Which makes sense.
You need to simulate physics in order to have a realistic movie. And we're also seeing game engines converge into the same line of work with Genie, and with the diffusion models are real-time game engines. Recent work on playable game generation from Tencent and Game Factory. A very recent paper from this week from Hong Kong University, where basically, you have videos being generated that are playable from a kind of first-person view perspective. And then finally, it's also converging with robotics. So in Jim Phan's lab, the GROOT project, or Groot, as we say in Dutch, they are using Cosmos to actually generate synthetic training data for robotics. So that brings us to our next. Well, there may be a lot of synthetic data, but we believe that humanoid robots will remain hype for all of this year. And we kind of make that more precise by saying that no more than 10,000 units will be sold. Well, I think it will actually be a lot less even.
Yeah, there are a few companies that are already producing.
You can buy them,
yeah,
right?
And I think what got most people's attention was the Tesla robot at the Cyber Truck event. It was this funny doing fancy tricks. Others walking. You can hear him talk and ask for an order from a person. Yes, people were excited. Like, they were thinking that, oh, this is the thing that I can buy at my home bartender and interact with. I think, there was a catch, and actually it turned out Elon was very careful not to say that these robots were autonomous, because actually they were not. They were teleoperated by humans behind the scenes. So yeah, they had the probably the hardware for it, but I think the training them to be fully helpful are.
Well, since Elon Musk is more and more reminding us of the Wizard of Oz, this was a real Wizard of Oz experiment, right? So actually we're not only not the only ones. This is a piece of research from Morgan Stanley, and they're predicting the humanoid robotics market to take off, but about 10 years from now. So I don't know, maybe they are too pessimistic, but I will stick that for our prediction is that for 2025 the number will be 0.0 rounded off. And that doesn't mean to say that there will be a lot of investment in humanoid robots. But this news from General Motors, which invested $10 billion in their Cruise robotaxi program only to kill it after several years, also reminds us of the fact that just investing massively is not enough to achieve success. But other form factors are actually seem to make more progress.
Right. So we have this company called Unitree Robotics from China, which are already shipping these dog-like or four-legged robots. So these go to for 3,000 euros, more or less. You can get them to your doorstep in 1 month, and they're much more versatile in that they can walk around more freely without having to look
And
like
they're
a.
being used for lots of business applications. The
Right.
reason why Anybotics is getting funding is for all kinds of search and rescue missions, fire brigade type of missions. And I think if you want to see what these little dogs are capable of, we have to watch this video for a bit. So this is the B2W from Unity, and this is a real video, I think.
Yeah, when I watched this video, I was a bit actually hyped, but very scared of how fast this thing is going down the hill. You definitely don't want to be behind it or be behind you.
And very practical. You're right. Right. Well, I don't know what is real and what's not, but seems to be a real product that you can order today. So I was pretty amazed. Um, all right. So kind of moving towards the end. Quantum computing is also in our category. Well, it will remain very hot and very interesting. We saw the end of the year with Alpha Qubit and the Willow chip announcement by Google. And actually, next year is the 100 years anniversary of quantum physics, so it's kind of nice PR. But some people are skeptical, and one of them is Nvidia's Jensen Huang. Although Nvidia is investing quite a lot in quantum computing ecosystems, he said, well, let's say that it's 10 to 20 years out before we will have any useful AI algorithms running on this type of hardware. And he wiped away a whole large part of the market cap of all the companies in the sector. Also, quantum AI startup Sandbox AQ raised a lot of money, but well, seems to be having some internal problems. If we think about these little robots, well, what's stopping anybody from mounting a machine gun on it?
Right, and we already see it being used in some conflicts like Ukraine and Russia, with Ukraine rolling out AI drones to take out some targets. But I think a lot of these headlines are kind of sensationalized because they're not being used exactly the way we fear that we'll have huge swarms of robots coming out after you autonomously without no help from the ground. And I think this is actually also reflected in the way they use them. Although they've definitely been a component in the current active conflict.
Yeah, so there was this interesting news story from end of December, where for the first time Ukraine attacked a village of Liptsi, with only a robotic, let's say, army, without any ground soldiers at all, and they seem to have won that confrontation. But I think here we're still kind of in a very risky area, because the soldiers don't actually trust the robots to be autonomous. The chance of attacking one of your own, or not defending the position well enough, seems to be a real problem here, much more than with self-driving cars. Although if we look at the US and who's coming into power there next week, and the sort of group that's leading the technology side of the administration, people grouped around Elon Musk and David Sachs, with big ties to Palantir and Unreal and other sort of AI-centric defense startups. Who knows? But our prediction is that AI-powered drone swarms will not decide any sort of major conflict this coming year. It's also a wish. So coming to the last prediction, there will be a major conflict, I think, but it will not be on the battleground. And our prediction is that there will actually be a major conflict between allies, between the US and EU, and it will be about tech regulation. And we see already a sort of the first shape of that with actually not Trump's, but Biden's most recent regulation around export control for AI.
Right, which I guess this interestingly colored map shows how they want to control both the chips that go out, but also the models that are trained on chips. So based on the 3 tiers they came up, they dictate who has access to a significant amount of compute and who can also train a model and keep it closed source, depending on which country you're at. So from tier 2 onwards, you have to actually ask for permission to train a closed model on some American chip technology.
Yeah, and there's if you look at the details of the map, there's some extremely interesting details that, for example, Portugal cannot get Nvidia chips, but then Spain can. Well, I don't think that's fair. Or Switzerland is also yellow, and all of Eastern Europe. So there's a lot of outrage about this map.
Even from Nvidia themselves, they don't feel like they want to limit who they export to, at least in Europe.
But there's an exception for open source models. So there's no export controls on open source models. I guess for pragmatic reasons, because how would you control that distribution? At the same time, with the Trump administration coming, we see an enormous amount of wiggling and knee bending from big tech. So I don't think this is the last sort of word on AI regulation. I think actually that Biden-Harris regulation will be overturned very quickly, and new regulation will come and will be dictated by Elon Musk and his friends, right? So we see that the main AI labs, both OpenAI, this is a piece on AI in America that was published this week, which starts with the words, "We believe that America can and must win the AI race against China." That's a pretty strong statement. And Dario Amodei dropped his coin in the same bucket, publishing a piece in the Wall Street Journal. But on the other hand, we don't know yet how the cards will be dealt, because actually within the Trump camp, there's also not a unanimous view on who will be pulling the strings. Well, I think Elon Musk currently has the better cards, but Steve Bannon vowed to kick him out as soon as possible. I didn't know that I would actually be agreeing on anything with Steve Bannon anytime in this century. Yeah, so basically this same group of people that are going to regulate technology and AI around Elon Musk will face the new European Commission. And yeah, what's your guess?
Who's going to win?
Yeah,
I think Europe is pretty good at regulating, but they also don't have the upper hand always in some of these negotiations.
well, so we have the Digital Services Act, we have the European AI Act, right? They are already accepted. So I don't think they're going to really pull that back. And so my prediction is that the EU will actually prevail for a couple of reasons, very pragmatic. I don't think the big tech companies can afford to really lose Europe as a market. That's obvious, right? But they could try to strong arm. But in general, you see that for large multinational companies, it's really a matter of being compliant everywhere locally. And then usually the strictest regulation kind of wins. And if they really try to bully us by threatening to pull out of NATO or some other silly move like that, well, there's other options.
Right, and we see this especially on AI. China does not back, despite being heavily embargoed on all the chips that Nvidia produces these days. We had this figures from Quen and DeepSeek that were pretty strong already last month, and yeah, with the latest releases on all fronts, vision language models, reasoning models, and so on, they seem to be just chipping away at OpenAI's lead more and more with every, I don't know, week release.
Yeah, so I think that means that the US trying to control export of frontier models is a bit of a moot point, maybe, if they are available open source from many other places, including China. But I would say there are other problems with
These models.
politics in the European-China relationship as well. But that's a longer discussion that we can have over drinks. And DeepSeek doesn't always know who it is. If you ask DeepSeek, what model are you? It will actually try to argue that it's ChatGPT. All right. So that brings us to the end of our predictions. We'll keep the score during the year and see what our accuracy is at the end of the year. Thanks for joining us. So we are Zeta Alpha. We build AI to discover and organize knowledge for high-tech companies with RAG and AI agents. And yeah, we hope to see you in the next edition of this webinar. In the meantime, enjoy discovery and try out Zeta Alpha, whether it is to catch up with the latest literature and news in AI, or to organize your own private data in your company for enterprise RAG and AI agents. Check it out on www.zetaalpha.com and join us for our next Trends in AI series. Thank you.
Thank you.